What is behind our fascination with hidden rooms, forgotten passageways, and abandoned tunnels? I'm your host, Leah.
And I'm Phil.
And while Steve is on vacation, I'm filling in for him. I'm Sam, and today we'll be jumping down the rabbit hole of secret spaces.
Ooh.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Okay, so I am welcoming Sam. Sam is my son. He is filling in today for Steve, so say hi.
Hello.
Welcome to the party, Sam.
Thank you, Phil.
And Steve is on vacation I am so incredibly jealous. He and Sir Kraken.
Yes.
He took Sir Kraken with him, and he's sending back pictures of Sir Kraken in Iceland,
Norway, Sweden, Stockholm,
Norway.
You name it. He's
All
been
of
everywhere.
them.
He's having a
Yeah,
blast.
I think today he sent us pictures of
Sir Kraken with clogs.
clogs. Yeah, wooden
was
clogs,
awesome.
and yeah. So yeah, he's out roaming. That little octopus is more well traveled than I am.
Than most of us.
Well, yeah,
Right.
True.
Of course, there's some of us that still think Texas is the only country in the world.
Okay, so we really do have a fascination with secret spaces, don't we? I remember playing the board game Clue, which depicts a large mansion, and in each corner room, there's a secret passage to another corner
Yep.
room. And I always love that. It brings to mind a bookshelf that swings open when you pull it out with the right book, revealing a dusty passageway or a set of stairs full of cobwebs. And
this is where, that Steve would introduce the Batman TV series.
Always.
And say,
he
you
always
remember the
works that.
head you could just put back or the piano that you could tickle and it would open the door.
That's right. Always with the Batman references. Of course, in these secret passageways, never a light switch.
No.
But always a convenient candelabra.
Or the pull string light bulb.
Well, I don't even think I've ever
That's
seen
the newer
that.
thing now. That's the newer thing. It's a pull string.
Did you know that the designers behind the game Clue based the graphics on an actual mansion?
Okay.
So, according to a 2021 article for dicebreaker.com by Matt Jarvis, Tudor Close, located in Rottingdean, that's a name, that's quite a name, Rottingdean, UK, near Brighton, includes an actual secret passageway from its kitchen to its bar.
Of course. It's easy access from the kitchen to the bar because you don't want to walk the regular hallways.
You don't want to have to see the servants.
Exactly.
I think it's a servants passageway.
Well, I'd like to mention some literature and movies that portray secret places in order to illustrate how these lend to our morbid curiosity for all things secret. House of Leaves, a book that Mom and I have both not finished, but really enjoyed the pieces of which that we've read, where a homeowner finds that the house that he has just bought doesn't really add up. The outside of the house is longer than the inside of the house. It doesn't really make sense. It's taking measurements and spoilers, his house ends up being this labyrinth that just goes on and on and on with doorways that lead to nowhere.
But it doesn't make any sense. And the book, though, itself is a labyrinth with footnotes and all of that's the reason I couldn't get through it, because I couldn't read all of that.
Yeah, and it's not printed typically either. It's not, top of the page to the bottom of the page. Some pages have one word on them and you just jump around.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really,
it's a difficult
it's an
book
adventure.
to get. Yeah, it's difficult to get through.
Does it have a key or maybe cliff notes?
That's what I'm it is such a cool book. I mean, it's really highly rated and it's such a cool concept. I just can't get through it.
You almost need a whole Reddit forum to get through it.
Right.
The ADD in people's not allowing this to happen.
Right.
Well, also, all right, let's move on.
Yeah. Also, there's, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where Alice takes a literal trip into an unknown and a mysterious world.
And, of course, Harry Potter's Chamber of Secrets and countless other movies that use this trope of a secret passage.
Yeah, and these constant themes in literature and entertainment give credence to our fascination with these secret places.
And we've actually touched on a lot of these secret places before in previous episodes. Most recently in our Pirates episode, we talked about a desk with a secret space in it. And they found a treasure map in there. And in our So Monumental episode from last year, we talked about many American monuments that have secret spaces in them, like the Washington Monument, the cave-like basement beneath the Lincoln Memorial, the unfinished Hall of Records behind Lincoln's head in Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
And I think even like in the Eiffel Tower over in Paris, they have that secret apartment that was built in.
For founding fathers too, right? I forget who stayed in it, but
Well, Eiffel created it for him.
But I think
like he met with Edison in there and that kind of thing. I think that's what you're thinking of. So one of my favorite secret places, though, that we've mentioned before is the Death Chute.
Ooh.
In our season 2 episode, Abandoned Places, we explored Waverly Hills Sanatorium in my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky.
Which we will visit later.
Oh, we're going to go back?
Yeah, to Louisville today.
Oh, that's right. You have a story from Louisville. The tuberculosis hospital, Waverly Hills Sanatorium, was built on top of a big hill and opened its doors in 1926 in response to a TB outbreak in the area. At its fullest, the hospital overflowed with more than 400 patients.
Oh, wow.
And there was a huge turnaround because they were dying and more coming in. There was no cure back then for TB. The only thing that they would really do is fresh air. So there was a lot of terraces where they would put the patients. And many people, of course, didn't make it off that hill alive. So in order to shuttle the dead to the bottom of the hill without being seen by the patients, the staff had a tunnel built into the hillside. The hillside. Maybe a lot of the patients thought of it as a hill. Yeah.
What's the title of Death Chute? I mean, why not?
But they had this tunnel built from the top of the hill to the bottoms in secret so that they could. And they make it sound like it's a laundry chute where they just, throw the bodies in. But that's not what it was. It was created in order for someone to be able to wheel a gurney down to a waiting hearse below. And because of the subject matter of secret spaces, I just have to say that many of our stories in this episode are going to be just as dark as this Waverly Hills Death Chute and may not be suitable for young ears. We're going to talk about some crime that involves sexual assaults and things like that. So just know, and murder.
Right.
So just know that.
Well, I know Mom and I, Leah and I, are both true crime fans. I assume, Phil, you are as well. But we come across tons of stories.
Wait, there's crime in this world?
Right.
Sorry, what?
The innocent Phil, yeah. We come across tons of stories where the perpetrator uses a secret place, a cellar, an abandoned building, or a secluded alleyway to either commit their crimes or to hide from the authorities after them. What is less common is designing and building an entire hotel with the idea of making your crimes easier to commit. That is the story of H.H. Holmes, a man that is given the credit of America's first ever serial killer. H.H. Holmes, by name of Herman Mudgett,
which love that name, right?
Was born into a wealthy family around 18...
Wait. H.H. Holmes.
Right.
And his middle name's Mudgett?
Actually, he went by many names. He was kind of a sketchy character, so he took on...
H.M. Holmes, but H.H. I'm just stuck on the middle name starting with an M.
No, I think Mudgett is his last name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Holmes, I think, is just a pseudonym.
It was one of the names that he,
But,
okay.
Well, come to find
confused.
out, H.H. Holmes is just the last pseudonym that he traded under. And so that just became...
that we know of.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, that's the one that he became famous for.
Got stuck on the name.
Anyway, by name of Herman Mudgett, was born into a wealthy family around 1861. The exact date is debated, but, he was born into the town of Gilmanton, New Hampshire. Holmes's intelligence was remarkable from a young age, and he had a special interest in medicine.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now here's where it starts to twist. As a boy, he was so interested in medicine that he would capture small animals in order to perform surgery on them, which, if that isn't a huge red flag, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's one of the serial killer trifecta things. Yeah.
And with this being in the early 1800s, I wonder if this is a story that started that.
Oh, it could be.
Right.
Study of him and his behaviors and stuff. Right.
Some accounts of his life even suggest that he may have killed one of his school playmates, which you will come to find is not too far off from his character, though that story has never been corroborated with hard evidence. I assume if you're killing small animals, if that's not a red flag, possibly killing one of your playmates and even being considered in that murder,
Then,
Yeah.
Suddenly, Bob just disappeared.
Right.
And so did the cat.
Yeah. Mudge had attended the University of Michigan to pursue a medical degree, and he was a mediocre student. The times being what they were, he was almost prevented from graduating when a local hairdresser accused him of falsely promising to marry her. And I say at the time, I think that kind of happens all of the time now. People make promises that they don't keep. I think that's funny that you could be, potentially kept from having a degree.
Yeah.
For,
it was
breaking
a
off an
different time,
engagement.
but
Yeah.
I think she dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, you'll see.
Or two.
Yeah. Shortly after he secured his degree, Mudgett moved to Chicago, where he began practicing as a pharmacist under the name Dr. H.H. Holmes, a name that would inevitably go down in infamy. The pharmacy he practiced from was owned by a widow that had been convinced to sell the property by Holmes against her late husband's wishes. He didn't really want her to sell it. She disappeared soon after, with Holmes claiming that she picked up and moved to California. He bought the empty lot across the street and began to build what would become the, quote, murder castle that was the stage for many of Holmes's devious acts. The 3-story hotel took 2 years to complete and had many oddities, such as soundproof rooms with gas lines leading into them that Holmes would later use to asphyxiate his guests, stairways leading to nowhere, trap doors, peepholes, and chutes that led into the basement. Now, these were actual chutes, not just disguised.
Right.
Now, being in construction for the last few years myself, I find it very hard to believe that no one on the construction crew noticed anything off about the project. Come to find out, Holmes thought about that too. It was said that he would constantly hire and fire new crews in order to keep fresh people on the project that would have no idea about the entire scope of the project. This was difficult, of course, slowing production down quite a bit. Holmes required all of his employees, hotel guests, and his many fiancés and wives to have life insurance policies, which he would gladly pay the premium of so long as he was listed as the main beneficiary. If anyone wants to get on that, I mean, I would pay.
Talk about red flags, right?
Ding, ding, ding.
Many of these people would simply disappear, leaving Holmes with a healthy insurance paycheck. Many witnesses would claim to see women enter the castle and never come back out. Being an opportunist, when the World's Fair was set to be held in Chicago, Holmes saw an incredible opportunity for his hotel business, with droves of out-of-town tourists flooding the area needing a place to stay, potentially alone tourists, young women.
Traveling out of town, right.
After being lured into the hotel, many of the guests would never be seen again. The castle had a basement laboratory, complete with a
Wait
window.
a minute. A laboratory? Are you British?
I assume, I mean, you just think of,
again, here we go.
Well, you just think of evil deeds don't happen in a laboratory. They happen in a
laboratory. Okay.
So,
I'll allow it.
Right. This basement had a window making furnace. And that's what he told everybody was the purpose of this thing. And I don't have it noted here, but the guy that he contracted to build the furnace, he kept, egging him to make it hotter and hotter. And he kept telling him, this is not hot enough to make windows. And the guy's saying, I've built many of these furnaces. This is definitely hot enough. And so, come to find out, he actually used that furnace to cremate the remains of his many victims. Holmes would murder.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Holmes would murder an unsuspecting guest or romantic partner of his and then send their bodies down one of the many chutes leading to the basement lab, where he would then skin them and sell their bones to schools of medicine in the area. These scams left Holmes rich.
He was quite the entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this guy was on top of it. I mean, when the World's Fair ended and Chicago's economy started to dry up, Holmes took his crimes out on the road. He traveled through the United States, committing insurance fraud all over the place and murdering some people along the way, as you do.
Well, you got to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually making another small fortune by stealing horses from Texas, the homeland, and selling them in St. Louis. He was eventually caught for this and taken to jail. It was in jail that Holmes would...
He was caught for being a horse thief.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well,
of
it was,
course,
it's
from
Texas,
so we would
right.
definitely catch him for that.
And that is
But
like
everything
the
else-
worst crime. You can be a murderer all you want,
Yeah, you
but
steal a horse.
Don't touch our
thieving,
horses.
yes.
Yeah.
Leave him alone.
We're going to hang you high.
Well, it was in jail that Holmes would, with his cellmate, concoct the insurance scam that would eventually lead to his capture and indictment for all of the other crimes that the authorities didn't know about at this time. Holmes would take out a $10,000 life insurance policy on himself, fake his own death, then give his cellmate $500 with the promise that he would hire a lawyer in case one was needed. Holmes attempted this plan after being released on bail, but the insurance company was suspicious of him and did not pay up. I imagine if you're coming to collect your own life insurance policy, it's a little fishy.
Right?
Yeah.
Photo ID, maybe not.
Yeah. Thinking he could still get away with this scam, but under a different circumstance, Holmes attempted a similar crime in Philadelphia with his longtime friend, Benjamin Petezel. He planned to take out a policy on Petezel and have him fake his own death, splitting the proceeds. He even had his wife in on this plan, Petezel's wife and kid. In actuality, Holmes murdered Petezel and just collected the money for himself. It wasn't long after that his old cellmate, furious that Holmes never paid him, told the authority of Holmes's scams, and not long after he was arrested and hanged for his many crimes. I got my information from Britannica.com and crimemuseum.org.
And there's actually, we have mentioned many times in the podcast, Eric Larson, who is a great writer, kind of a historical writer. And he wrote about H.H. Holmes in his book, Devil in the White City, which I have not read, but I think Steve has.
More than likely.
Yeah, you know what? Anytime we mention
library.
a book or a place, so Steve's like, yeah, I did that. So anyway, he's a fantastic writer. Even though he writes about history, it's very entertaining and just sucks you in. And I have heard really good things about this book. So, okay. So continuing on in crime, this next story is incredible. Elizabeth Fritzl was an 18-year-old girl living in a small village in central Austria with her mom and dad when she suddenly went missing on August 28, 1984. Her mother quickly filed a missing persons report, but when the search went on for weeks with no sign of Elizabeth, her parents were left to assume the worst. But then a letter arrived. It was from Elizabeth and claimed that she had grown tired of her family and had run away. Her father, Joseph, told police that he had no idea where Elizabeth would have gone, but suggested that she had likely joined a religious cult because she had talked about previously doing that. Years passed. The missing persons case grew cold, and Elizabeth, despite growing up past her rebellious teenage years, never returned home to visit. But she did send an occasional letter. The first letter was attached to the blanket or clothes of a baby left on the Fritzl's doorstep. The note from Elizabeth claimed that she couldn't take care of the baby and was leaving it with her parents for safekeeping. This happened 2 additional times, with Joseph and Rosemarie Fritzl graciously taking in their 3 grandchildren and raising them in their house. But all was not what it seemed. Elizabeth never, quote, returned home simply because she had never left.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wait.
On August 28, 1984, that night, Elizabeth went missing. Her father had called her into the basement to help him with a door he was refitting to the newly renovated cellar. Elizabeth held the door while Joseph fixed it into place. When it was finally installed, Joseph forced Elizabeth through the door and knocked her unconscious using an ether-soaked towel. For the next 24 years, Elizabeth would remain in the labyrinth of rooms that her father had painstakingly and secretly constructed in the cellar just for this scheme of his.
24 years.
24
years.
And 3 kids?
So far.
Okay, just stay with me.
Wow.
In their family, Joseph held supreme power. No one dared question him, so when he disappeared for hours at a time to construct this elaborate set of rooms in the basement, he commanded that no one bother him, and so his family wasn't fully aware of the extent of his construction project. Then, after Elizabeth was imprisoned, Rosemarie didn't think to question Joseph's continued habit of disappearing into the basement for hours, sometimes even overnight.
Oh.
The rest of the story may not be suitable for children.
Oh, no.
And so it was that Joseph turned his own daughter into his sex slave.
Ugh.
Those children that turned up on the doorstep, those were Joseph's own children with Elizabeth, who was forced to live every day underground without ever seeing the sun or going to a doctor. Joseph brought supplies and food to Elizabeth every day at first, and then it petered off to like maybe twice a week or once a week. I can't imagine what it was like for her.
No.
To hear him coming through the door. First of all, it's got to be relief, because what if he had died during this time?
Oh, right.
Right.
She would have just
She
would have starved to death.
Yeah.
It was, that was a horrible thought, I'm sure, going through her mind. But then also, he was a monster.
And I know, listening, you can't see us, but I'm bundled up here, freaked out. I've got goosebumps. 24 years.
And it's your own dad.
Right.
Yes. And I will say that he had actually, when she went missing, how old did I say she was? 16? 18. No, she was 18 when she went missing, but she had been sexually molested by him since she was 11.
Oh.
Okay, 2 years into her captivity, Elizabeth became pregnant, though she miscarried 10 weeks into the pregnancy. 2 years later, she became pregnant again, giving birth to a baby girl named Kirsten in August of 1988. Joseph didn't allow Elizabeth to leave to see a doctor or go to the hospital. She gave birth alone in her prison.
The worst part about it, I think, one of the worst parts, is that she's not, you're not delivering this child in a hospital setting. You're not even, doing it at a conventional home birth type situation where you've got
midwife.
A midwife. No, she was given supplies by Joseph.
Yes.
he gave her.
And he wasn't even there. Like, I think I read she was entirely alone for that first birth.
Right. And and I think he gave her a pair of scissors or something for the umbilical cord, and that was it.
Yes.
And so, anyway.
And I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. I think he gave her a book.
Maybe. If he was so kind.
Yes, it was this was horrible. Anyway, so 2 years later, another baby arrived, and this time a boy she named Stefan. These two children stayed in the basement with Elizabeth, who was determined to make their life as normal as she could possibly do it by giving them the school lessons she had once had. She really loved these children and took care of them. And they had homeschooling. Of course, she wasn't a teacher. She didn't have any
with what she had.
Right. She didn't have any resources or anything. She just did the absolute best she could. And she decorated it as best she could. It was... Anyway. Elizabeth would give birth to 5 more children.
Oh, my goodness.
One more was allowed to stay with her. One died shortly after birth, and the other 3 were placed on the doorstep outside the house along with a letter. Amazingly, social services never questioned the situation. Like, they just accepted that Joseph's story that Elizabeth was, outliving her life, And,
well, you also have no reason to question it.
I guess, I don't know.
If he's taking stuff down in the basement and none of the family is actually saying anything to anybody else or questioning it themselves,
right?
They know no different.
Well, and I say this at the end of the article, but honestly, his wife was just as much a victim.
Oh, for sure.
She was
Different
not
type
allowed.
Of abuse there.
Yeah, she was not allowed to question him, and she thought her daughter went missing.
Yep.
She truly did. So who knows how long this imprisonment of 4 of his family members Joseph would have continued with, or how horrifyingly it would have ended if he were to die. In 2008, 19-year-old Kirsten, who had never been out of the basement her entire life, became gravely ill. Elizabeth somehow convinced her father to let Kirsten go to a hospital. Grudgingly, her father agreed, and he moved Kirsten upstairs and called for an ambulance. He made up a story that he had a note from Kirsten's mother explaining her condition. So kind of like the baby on the doorstep, only now this
19-year-old just suddenly appeared.
That's right.
Right.
Strikingly looks like family.
And the police became involved at that point because it was, the hospital staff was a little suspicious and the police became suspicious. They were questioning Kirsten.
Probably more malnutrition.
And that's exactly what it was. She was very malnourished. It was
super
like scurvy
pale, too.
or whatever.
This girl had never seen the sun.
And so the investigation was reopened. Joseph caved under the pressure. Perhaps he was becoming aware of how difficult it was going to be to keep up with the imprisonment in his old age. And on April 26, 2008, he released Elizabeth from the cellar for the first time in 24 years. She immediately went to the hospital to see her daughter, where hospital staff alerted police to her suspicious arrival. I think he had a story.
Yeah.
He was trying to, but honestly, at this point, it just wasn't going to work. Elizabeth was taken in and questioned by the police, and after she made them promise that she never had to see her father again, she then told the story of how he had imprisoned her and sexually assaulted her for over 2 decades, that she had been listed as missing. Joseph was arrested that night, and the children in the cellar were released.
Oh, my goodness.
And again, like I was going to say, don't judge Rosemary too harshly. She was completely unaware of what was happening. And also during this time, Elizabeth and her children were down in the basement. The Fritzels actually rented out a room or a little apartment on the first floor of their house. And if there was an odd noise or whatever, Joseph told them, it was the pipes. It was whatever. They had no clue either.
Oh, my goodness.
So he was that good.
There was also one tenant, I think, that had a dog that would
bark in the middle of the night.
Right.
That's right.
And sense something, and the tenant could never figure out what it was, so he continued to dismiss it. But you're thinking
it was kind of one of those hindsight. Now, okay,
The
now
dog
it
said
seems
something was up in that room,
but,
behind the wall.
Man.
Weird.
Today, Elizabeth and her children live under new identities to protect them from the media, and as far as we know, have gone on to try to live as normally as they can. During his trial, Joseph admitted guilt on an incest charge, but pled innocent to enslavement and to the murder of his child. After he saw Elizabeth Fritzl's taped testimony, though, he changed his plea to full guilt, acknowledging that his failure to secure medical care for the newborn may have directly contributed to his death, or her death. We don't know if it was a girl or boy. For his crimes, Fritzl was found guilty on all accounts: negligent murder, enslavement, incest, rape, coercion, and false imprisonment. He was sentenced to life in prison in 2009.
Oh, my gosh.
He now suffers from advanced dementia. Oh, and I just want to say that solitary confinement, that is very fitting.
Yeah, exactly.
Very fitting.
Just would be better with no windows.
But now he suffers from advanced dementia, and none of his family has ever visited him.
Why would they?
So,
who?
That's right.
Right.
I got my info from allthat'sinteresting.com and aetv.com.
Another crime story involving a secret room is that of the, quote, locked room murder, a seemingly impossible to solve mystery. Walburga Korschel, known as Dolly, was a German immigrant that grew up on a humble farm. She married a wealthy apron factory owner by the name of Fred Osterreich in her early 20s. If that's not a German name.
Yeah. Osterreich. But an apron factory? I just didn't know. I mean, I guess
in that
there's
time.
factories to make aprons, but wow.
They have to have them.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know. I just didn't think that, it would be like a garment factory that makes all kinds of things. But no, this one's just dedicated for aprons.
I wonder if you have to wear an apron.
To be wealthy, they have to be really good aprons.
I guess.
They even put monikers on them.
Yeah. The couple settled in Milwaukee, but their happily ever after was not to be. Fred was an alcoholic and Dolly was sexually unsatisfied.
Oh, wow. You needed to...
Just go right out there and say it.
Okay.
Wait, hey, guess what?
Yeah. One day, Dolly's Singer sewing machine stopped working. Fred had a 17-year-old employee that worked in his factory, Otto Sandhuber, that he knew was a skilled repairman. So he sent Otto over to their house. Mrs. Osterreich, Dolly, 33 at the time, answered the door wearing nothing more than a silk robe and stockings.
Oh.
Ow, ow. I love a line from my source material at atlasobscura.com where they say, quote, "In the master bedroom, the dusty old Singer machine remained untouched. The same could not be said for Mrs. Osterreich."
Was that like a joke that she's dusty and old too?
Oh, yeah, dusty. Yeah, both dusty and old. That day would begin a decades-long affair between the two. In the beginning of their affair, Otto and Dolly would meet in hotels, but it didn't take long for them to throw caution to the wind and pursue their carnal pleasures on the Osterreich's own wedding bed. Mind you, this is the early 1910s, a time marked by conservative moralism. People weren't sleeping around so much.
Well, they just weren't reporting it as much.
Right, behind closed doors anyway. It wasn't long before the neighbors started to notice a strange young man frequently visiting the household.
He's the pool boy.
Right. Well, Dolly would tell these nosy neighbors that Otto was her vagabond half-brother and leave it at that. That was it. Dolly knew that wasn't sustainable and that her husband would find out if they weren't careful, so she came up with a plan. Otto would quit his job and move into the Osterreich's attic. Fred never went up there anyway, and that meant the lovers could continue their tryst away from prying eyes. The biggest caveat was that Otto would have to essentially give up his entire life to Dolly, as there was no way that he could leave the house without risking being caught. Otto didn't mind. He had no family to speak of, and he was obsessed with Dolly, later telling the LA Times that he had grown to love her as a, quote, boy loves his mother.
Oh.
Ooh.
Okay,
Especially awkward.
And
That's
he
Sitting
was-
across
weird.
from my own mother.
Yeah. Hang on.
Oh, leave the rubber chicken alone. No, okay, so we got to just stop and
That's just weird.
reflect the fact that he was 17, she was 33 at the time that it began.
Started,
Right.
yeah.
So that was, wow, that's
Yeah.
a huge age difference. And yeah,
I mean, is
okay.
it sugar mama? You know,
I mean, at this point,
Oh.
yeah, because you're living in her attic and she can come see
look,
you whenever
I'm
she
a married
wants.
man, but I could use a sugar mama. I mean,
Oh,
come on.
I'm telling.
on, yeah.
I'm telling.
The attic that housed Otto was humble, only having enough space for a cot and a tiny desk. He would keep his mind busy with the many nautical fiction books that Dolly would bring home. This would instill a dream in Otto to one day write pulp fictions of his own. For those of you that don't know what a pulp fiction is, it's kind of an advanced smut. So these are, highly sexualized books that would have, cover pictures of, women.
Scantily clad. women.
yeah, like
And so-
Fabio.
Yeah, so right. I wonder if he opened the door
Can't
and
believe this
there's
isn't but a-
right. I wonder if he opens the door this first time and there's Dolly, and he just recalls all of those books that he had been obsessed with, and he's thinking this is a
Oh.
dream come true.
Oh my
You know.
gosh. Well,
Maybe
he
that's just
was
color for the report.
a 17-year-old boy at
Right,
the time
right.
too. So
Didn't need much.
yeah.
By 1918, Otto had been living in their attic for 5 years.
Wow.
Coming down during the day to do the diddly with Dolly.
I cannot believe you wrote that. Oh my gosh.
Well, he wasn't just there for that. He helped her keep house and make bathtub gin.
Okay. Is
Well,
that
you
a
know,
euphemism or
fuel-
is that
no,
real like
that's-
moonshine?
Yeah, fuel for
Side
pleasure.
Okay. Wow.
He even published one of his own stories under a pen name, a pulp fiction. He was able to publish one. Of course, Dolly was the one that did all of the carry work to the publisher,
Sure.
but he got one published. He's doing things. He's really moving up in the world.
He
Meanwhile,
already started
Moving up
there.
to the
right,
attic.
moving up to the attic. Meanwhile, Fred began to question his sanity. He would see shadows cross the bedroom door in the middle of the night. He noticed that his cigars would go missing, and he constantly heard noises coming from the attic. Deducing that he just needed to get the heck out of Milwaukee, Fred told Dolly they were going to pack up and move to Los Angeles. Dolly agreed on one condition. The house had to have an attic. I can't imagine seriously going to your husband and saying there is this one condition.
We gotta have
It's
an
got to be a
attic.
traditional
It's
house.
Yeah.
you know?
It's better than saying, "Hey, it needs a basement."
Right, yeah. She sent Otto ahead of them, and by the time the Osterreichs moved into their new home, Otto, now 22 years old, was already comfortably situated in his new attic abode.
My goodness.
Right. Los Angeles was nothing that Fred had hoped it would be. I mean, the
Yeah,
problem that
so
you're having there is following you. Even if you don't know what the problem is, it's there.
Yeah, right.
Your baggage arrived ahead of time.
Right.
That's right.
But in addition to that, his marriage to Dolly was just deteriorating fast, and he couldn't seem to keep himself away from the bottle. His alcoholism was compounding. During a particularly raucous fight between the two on August 22nd, 1922, Otto, fearing the safety of his mistress, flew down from the attic and brandished 2 of Fred's .25 caliber pistols and shot his rival 3 times in the chest, killing him instantly.
Dun, dun, dun.
If I've got 2 pistols, I'm shooting more than 3 shots. Maybe those are
you
just
know,
the ones that hit.
Maybe he was just really good.
Yeah.
And it did the job. so-
Left,
Yeah.
right, left.
Yeah. Dolly flew into action immediately in order to cover up her lover's involvement. She and Otto staged the house to look like a home invasion gone wrong. Otto took Fred's diamond watch that he always wore and locked Dolly in the closet before fleeing the scene back into his attic. Once tucked away, Dolly began howling until one of her neighbors called the police, who quickly came to investigate. Finding the body of Fred, they proceeded with caution to the closet where Dolly's voice was coming from. They found the key and unlocked the door and started to question Dolly as to what happened. I didn't write it down, but I think the key was in another room under some furniture or something, kind of staged as if the
Okay.
killer just kind of
Quiet.
tossed it. Yeah. The police had no reason to question Dolly's story, After all, there was no way she could have locked herself in the closet, so she would go on to happily collect her inheritance of millions of dollars from this apron business and bought a nice new home with a comfy, large attic.
Wait, she's still stuck in the attic?
Right. Why might she still need an attic for Otto with her husband out of the way? Well, the nature of their attraction was based on dominance and submission, with Otto later saying that he was a slave to his love for Dolly.
Oh, wow.
Which is, So Otto continued to stay in his newly furnished attic without a single complaint.
Okay.
Dolly started dating her lawyer, Herman Shapiro, on the side and began to make some incriminating mistakes. Firstly, she gifted Herman the diamond watch that she had reported as stolen during her husband's murder.
Oops.
Right. Herman recognized the watch and asked about it. I mean, after all, Fred had, he was known for, he was known for wearing this watch. It's an uncommon watch, and here he is being gifted it.
He's the lawyer.
Right. And he asked about it, but Dolly said that she had later found it under a couch cushion and didn't want to bother the police with it. So innocent. Secondly, Dolly had also had another lover of hers, Roy Klum, dispose of the murder weapons in a nearby tar pit on the night of the murders. So this isn't the only affair she's having. I mean, this is one of many.
Yeah.
And Otto... Ugh.
And you can't tell a secret to more.
Right.
Too many people know.
Right. At this point, yeah. In 1923, following a nasty breakup, Klum, the one that got rid of the murder weapons, contacted the authorities and confessed to disposing of the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
The police opened the investigation into Dolly, but still were baffled as to how Dolly could have locked herself in the closet, so they released her from custody. They didn't have anything.
Right.
During her hearings, Dolly had Shapiro, that lawyer, deliver food to her vagabond half-brother living in her attic, and he was happy to do so. Upon meeting Shapiro, Otto was so starved for any contact from the world that he began to just ramble on about his life, including his affair with Dolly. I mean, you're telling that to her boyfriend who's thinking he's exclusive.
Right.
Shapiro was not happy with this and promptly kicked him out of the house. The frightened Otto fled to Canada. He's out of there. By 1930, Herman and Dolly's relationship was coming to a bitter end. So she's running through guys. I mean, this is... Feeling spiteful.
Revolving door.
Right.
Yeah.
Feeling spiteful, Shapiro told authorities of the existence of Otto, who had recently moved back to Los Angeles, conveniently, after this relationship had ended. Otto and her...
He just suddenly shows up.
Right. They're back in the same area. The authorities quickly moved to arrest the couple, and once the papers got a hold of this particularly scrumptious piece of gossip, Otto and Dolly had a posse of paparazzi following them everywhere. The jury found Otto Sandhuber guilty of manslaughter on July 1st, but as the statute of limitations was 7 years and the trial was held 8 years after the crime, Otto's charges were dropped. Dolly was acquitted for her charges of conspiracy and soon after found a new lover whom she kept for 30 years and eventually married. She died a free woman in 1961.
Oh my gosh. Nobody gets it in the end.
Oh.
And it's horrible because when I hear crime stories and I hear stuff like this, I'm like, you are so dumb. Why did you do, I'm like, I'd have done it this way.
Well, I got my information from atlasobscura.com and the latimes.com. Interestingly, I mean, I'm getting it from the website that originally reported it. The LA Times did back in 1930.
Way back then.
Yeah. First-hand information there.
Wow.
Okay, so let's take a break from murder and mayhem, okay? Whitaker Wright. What a name, right? Whitaker was a character, an unforgettable one. And in 1890, Whitaker, a self-made millionaire, and I use big finger quotes on self-made millionaire.
Wait, did he print his own? I hear the comment. I just got to ask.
Okay, just listen to the story. We'll get into it. But he actually was a millionaire. He was rolling in money. Okay. He bought and renovated a 32-room mansion on a 9,000-acre lavishly landscaped estate located near the British village of Whitley.
$20.
Whitaker. Yeah. I love his name. Whitaker Wright. Whitaker Wright. He was, like I said, absolutely rolling in money and loved spending it. Probably the best known example of his lavish indulgences was the smoking room he had constructed.
Does this guy need friends?
Well, okay. Wait, just listen.
This sounds great so far.
Yeah.
Unlike the people of the previous story, this one doesn't end so well.
Mm.
While not exactly a secret, the room was hidden beneath one of the 3 man-made lakes on his property. While he
It's under. It was
under a lake.
3 lakes.
No, it was under one.
One of them.
One of the three. One of the 3 on the 9,000
right
acres.
in the middle.
Is this place on Airbnb? Can we
Right?
go?
Seriously,
Listen, it still exists. I'm going to tell you about it.
Nice.
So while he constructed it to be a quote-unquote smoking room, those who saw it were quick to call it a ballroom. No matter what you call it, the room was stunning. The underwater room is accessed by a spiral staircase leading down to a vaulted tunnel under the lake. The tunnel then opens into a large circular room under a domed, windowed aquarium roof that lets in the natural sunlight filtered through the water of the lake. It's glorious.
That's awesome
we'll
right
have
there.
Pictures.
Come on.
It's also now, after all these years,
Moldy?
pretty wet down there.
Moldy.
Well, yes. The room still exists all these years, but silt has built up on the sides of the, on the sides of it. So it covers the first 2 rows of windows. And then the rest of the windows are covered in this algae. So so it's all green. Like the light coming through is green.
It's an emerald color.
And everything. Yeah,
Nice.
but it's still really cool.
Well,
looking.
look, I live in Waco, and Magnolia is just crazy over there with Fixer Upper and everything. I'm thinking this is like, come on, new
Fixer Upper,
episode?
that's right.
They could just
Come
go
on,
down
Chip
there.
and Joanna, let's go. Yeah.
But you know what?
Squeegee the windows.
You have to
That's
have
what
a
he,
diver and
that's what
spray
he
of
forgot to
Windex,
do was just hire a lake boy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Snorkel, here you go, bud. Come on.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Here's your squeegee.
Okay, so water is very hard to control.
No.
And for
really?
extended periods of time. So the floors, walls, everything is damp and moldy in there today.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
But it's still spectacular to see. And I couldn't find any information on it, but I don't think people are allowed in there.
Well, it's probably not.
Yeah, because probably structurally they're worried, about that.
Water has an ability to go anywhere and find a way in.
Absolutely.
And once it does, it's no longer stable.
And
Right.
we're going to have pictures on our social media, and you can tell, like, the floor is wet. There's little puddles everywhere and stuff.
I bet
So
in its heyday it was amazing.
I know. And it is 130 years old, so it could come crashing down at any moment. But what you can see, though, is the statue of Neptune on the top of the dome roof. He seems to be, like, rising out of the water in the middle of the lake.
This
And
guy
can
was
you
balling.
imagine?
This
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah.
So, like,
I want to
and
be his friend.
Can you imagine
130 years
seeing
ago.
it all lit up
Oh,
under
seriously.
the
man.
lake?
Ah, shoot.
Oh.
So Whitaker Wright's wealth didn't last long, as it was built on illegal investments and business dealings, in which
So
he
maybe
stood
not with his
trial.
best friend.
Right.
In 1904, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison by the Royal Courts of Justice. Whitaker wouldn't go to prison, though. He wasn't having that.
Yeah, let my man go.
He
Come on.
was found in a small side room of the court, lying dead on the floor.
Oh, never mind.
There was a revolver
He
in
got
his
out.
pocket.
Yeah.
There was a revolver in his pocket, presumed to be used as a backup in case the cyanide pill he had swallowed didn't quite do the trick. But it did.
Ugh.
And so ended the larger-than-life epic story of Whitaker Wright.
I mean, if you're living in a place with a dome under Neptune in the middle of this lake,
I know.
prison? I mean, come on. Prison's not.
Yeah, it's just not going to do it for
Right.
you.
It's
And
not gonna
I've
cut
got a
it.
picture,
How
a drawing
bland.
of the guy. He's very, like...
Pinky up,
He's very distinguished
monocle,
looking, yeah. And I got my info, and we are really using Atlas Obscura a lot.
We love it.
We
Well,
love
the
Atlas
site's
Obscura.
amazing.
Got it from Atlas Obscura and a March 2020 article by Katerina Papathanassiou.
And if you're looking for a podcast to sponsor,
Right.
we'd gladly have conversation with you.
For the VeilMagazine.com.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
Okay, so for today's oddity, time is such a weird thing. We've talked about it before, how time can get wonky in our Time Warp episode from earlier this year. The different ways we've invented to keep up with time can get a little bizarre as well. So you remember when you had a thing, Sam, for the Beatles?
Who didn't? I mean, come
Well,
on.
true, but oh my goodness, you listened to them for
You
quite
started
a while.
it. I think you got me
know.
hooked on the Beatles one album.
No, it wasn't me. It was your friend Jonathan.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
Jonathan. Anyway, so
I will
Shout
say
out to
this.
Jonathan.
I will say this: if you're going to let your kids or your people listen to music, give them the whole.
Mhm.
Yeah, true.
Introduce
True.
them to the whole genre,
And
especially the beginning of rock and roll.
Well, I was
Yeah.
also going to say, I mean, the Beatles are every genre. I mean,
Exactly.
they go back and forth all of the time.
I
in
mean,
different-
shoot, for this generation's, or for at least the last couple, video game was made just out of the Beatles called Rock Band,
Yes.
of
I
the
didn't know
entire Beatles albums, or at least
Yeah.
the majority of them.
this is so
Jonathan
funny.
had that game. We played the heck out of it.
The
Yeah.
Beatles really have a very tenuous connection to this story.
Yeah.
Well,
But
of
I
course,
bring it up
it's
because
just
of
a
their song,
Right.
8 Days a Week. Do
Uh-huh.
you know? Okay, so you know the song, 8 Days a Week.
Days a week.
Yep.
It's not enough. Well, I'm not comfortable with singing on mic, but that's
Hey,
how it
it's not
goes.
too
Yeah,
bad.
that's
You did
right.
okay.
So you know it.
At least
Well-
we carried that traditional forward. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah. I don't have his baritone.
Well, there was a time in 1867 when one particular state in the U.S. experienced a week consisting of 8 days instead of just 7.
Ooh.
Anybody have any guesses?
Arizona.
Arizona?
have
What do
no
you say,
idea.
Sam?
I mean, Utah's got all sorts of weird things going on.
Yeah, true.
But
It does.
Hey, if we're going back to Louisville, it's going to be
Oh,
Kentucky.
you know
Yeah,
what?
true,
Hey,
true.
what? No. Wrong on all counts. What if I gave you the hint Seward's Folly?
Oh gosh, Seward's Folly. Where is
I
that
don't remember
from?
that. Okay, so the United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867 through the negotiations of Secretary of State
I do remember this.
W.H.
yes.
Seward. I thought you would.
I'm so sorry, Steve, Mr. Meeker, as I usually called him. I'm failing your history class
Of
right
course,
now.
there was about 20,000 other people listening to this
Right.
as we produced it, and they're all going, "How could you two not know
Oh,
this?"
Yeah, you know.
And while Sam
Of
wasn't,
course, it's Alaska.
Dr. Meeker taught two of my kids history, but Sam wasn't one of them. However,
Yeah, we wanted to touch on this earlier, but I knew Dr. Meeker just because he was such a cool guy. My last class of the day was gym.
this is in junior high, by the way.
Right. Well,
So
sixth
just a couple
grade?
years ago.
6th grade.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
so middle school. Anyway, yeah, a couple of years ago, right? And Dr. Meeker would open his classroom to just random students because he would play Looney Tunes as we were waiting for
Mhm.
the bus. And so instead of sitting in a room, large, cold room full of sweaty kids, I opted to go across the hall to Dr. Meeker's room where I would watch Looney Tunes and wait for the
Well,
bus.
yeah, that's a better education.
Oh, definitely. And, that's just my core memory of Dr. Meeker.
Yes,
He's
and
been
that's
really good to us.
That's a pretty good apt memory that explains his classroom very, very
Yeah.
well. Back to this story. So the press started calling the acquisition of Alaska Seward's Folly because despite the bargain price of $7 million, roughly 2 cents an acre, the mostly frozen land seemed like a worthless waste of government money. People changed their tune, however, when gold was discovered in 1898, and the Alaskan Territory has since proven to be rich in many different resources.
Absolutely.
But getting back to the time slip, Alaska officially became part of the United States on Friday, October 18th, 1867. And for the people living in Alaska, it was, pretty seamless changeover except for one thing, the calendar. The United States was using, and we've talked about calendars
Oh,
before,
yes,
we
for
were
sure.
using the Gregorian calendar, the one we still use, but Russia was using the Julian calendar. When Alaska switched countries, it also switched calendars, which required a shift from October 6th, 1867, which was a Friday, to October 19th, 1867, a Saturday in the Gregorian system. Alaska would lose 12 days that year, but at least it still had the weekend, right?
Somewhere. They just landed on it.
Yeah, so the 8 days a week, did you get a 3-day
No,
weekend?
wait. The other glitch had to do with time zones. While Alaska was part of Russia, the international date line ran between Alaska and Canada, putting Alaska in the same time zone as Russia and on a different day altogether than the
Yeah.
U.S. So that couldn't continue when the territory changed hands. So the easy fix was to shift the international date line to the other side of Alaska, but in doing so, Alaska gained a day.
Okay.
So they lost 12,
So us being
gained one back. So instead of going from Friday, October 6th to Saturday, October 19th, it went from Friday the 6th to Friday the 18th.
I can
Probably. It's kind of
Groundhog Day,
right?
anybody?
I can imagine, 10 guys sitting around a round table just trying to
figure
this out. Just looking up at the ceiling tiles thinking, golly, how do we fix this predicament? And then coming to Friday.
And you think daylight savings time is crazy, right?
It's still Friday.
But it's probably the only time in history that there were 2 Fridays back to back in one place.
Oh,
I got my
terrible.
information from the Now I Know email newsletter by Dan Lewis and History.com.
Oh, wow.
People purchase homes all of the time and end up finding hidden portions of the house or hidden rooms that are either not visible from the outside at all or hardly even visible from the inside of the house, being hidden in crawl spaces, behind bookcases, or even below carpeted floors. Taking that idea to the next level is when you live in a place and don't know there's a secret space, but someone else knows. When someone takes up residence in an unlived in or an abandoned house or building, they are known as squatters. But sometimes a squatter will secretly take up residence in the attic or crawl space of a home that is being lived in. They hide while the residents are at home, but when they are gone, the squatters will take advantage of the food in the kitchen, the bathroom facilities, and generally make themselves at home.
I had a bunch of those. They called
call them
themselves
children?
kids, but
A couple of them still.
yeah, that's right.
They haven't-
A couple of them haven't been kicked
The
out yet.
squatters haven't left yet.
I am not one of those. I moved out. I'm a very proud apartment renter. This is called frogging, spelled with a PH. And depending on how stealthy you are, I know frogging, and depending on how stealthy they are, the frogger can live like this long term without the residents finding out about it.
Which is creepy as all get out.
How do you not
Yeah.
notice that you had 6 Dr. Peppers yesterday or when you left this morning and then
Well-
you come back and there's only 5?
Well, my wife lies all of the time about the food that she's consumed, and so I could very easily see some chocolate going missing.
Yeah, I think it's
Honey,
harder.
I swear I didn't.
Like
know.
if you're
Do you
living
sleepwalk?
alone.
I'm just going to ask.
Do I sleepwalk?
Yes.
No.
Do you know that you don't?
I mean, I feel like
See, there's all kinds of ways to justify it, and maybe I just forgot what that kind. If you're living alone, I can see that this would really be an issue.
weird.
But
Yeah.
if you're living with, if there's 2 of you living there or more,
yeah.
And
you
got,
know.
yeah.
you got
Well,
kids.
look,
yeah,
food-wise,
then,
look,
food's
me and my
going.
brothers would hoard food.
That's
if we,
right.
If we
I'd
had,
find it under the bed,
Yeah, if we had if mom and dad bought a pack of chips and we knew that
a variety pack.
Yeah, if we knew the Doritos were going to be gone within a day, we would take 2 bags each and go hide them somewhere so that the other brothers wouldn't have access to it.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm
See?
blaming that on the other brothers. I know I did it, and I assume they did it too,
Mhm.
but I don't have evidence for that. So I guess innocent until proven guilty. But I
yeah,
definitely
food
did it.
going missing all the time. That just
Yeah.
never even. It was status quo.
Yeah, that variety of pack of chips was down to the Fritos within 48 hours.
That's right.
Those are some of the best ones. Throw some cheese on those bad boys and you nail them.
Yeah, some Wolf Brand chili. Oh.
Exactly.
The froggers often come out of hiding at night while the residents are asleep. They roam the house, moving things, eating food, as we said,
Pet
and
the
many
dog,
times.
cat, because they know they're there.
Right.
Yeah.
And many times they even steal things. As you can imagine, this is a huge invasion of privacy and security. And when the crime is found out, a lot of the times the residents face a big hurdle to overcome the psychological violation. How do you come to terms with the fact
The
that
dude's been living upstairs for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody just breaks into your home, that's a huge
Yeah.
thing to get over psychologically. But
Right.
imagine, you're thinking back and
Wow.
somebody was watching you sleep. That is crazy.
Eating a bag of Fritos.
Right,
So-
you got Fritos. Well, with that in mind, I'll turn it over to you, Mom. You have a story about this?
I do a ghost story that is not a ghost story.
Ooh.
In 1986, Annie and Jessica Andrews were teenage sisters who had tragically lost their mother to cancer and really missed her. Their mother's somewhat sudden death, so it wasn't like a long, drawn-out thing. It was pretty sudden. It shook the family to its core, and they struggled to find a new normal. Their dad, Brian, had to start working a lot more hours to make ends meet, and so he left Annie and Jessica alone at home a lot. He worked second shift, so he didn't get home until late into the night or maybe even early in the morning hours. So they were home alone a lot together at night. Annie and Jessica were hit really hard by the loss of their mother, so one night they decided to play around with a Ouija board.
Smart.
Yeah.
This
and
always goes well.
Well, I mean, it's teenagers, I can see it.
I'd play a Ouija board for you, Mom.
to contact me after my death, because that's what they
I know
were doing.
you'd be sitting right there waiting for it.
Oh, hush. Listen to that. I don't need a Ouija board. I'm just going to haunt you.
Yeah.
Out of all of her kids, yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
The rest of them, shit. No, she'll come after you.
No, you would find a way to talk to me, just to continue talking.
Yeah.
I know
Or
you're
just-
sitting right there.
Okay, let's pull it in. Anyway, the girls they didn't expect anything to happen. They just wanted some connection to their mom. So they held a little seance, but nothing happened. And after a while, they returned upstairs. That night, as they were both lying in bed, they had separate rooms. They had each had their separate rooms. They were lying in bed trying to fall asleep. Both of the girls started hearing tapping noises. Jessica got up and went into Annie's room, and they listened together to the tapping noises. They missed their mom so much, they were really kind of hoping that the tapping sounds were communications from their mom's ghost. So they began asking questions. The tapping sounds were responding correctly to the questions.
Ooh.
It
Oh,
was
creepy.
scary, but it was also kind of reassuring to them.
This makes me think of Inception.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this is a scary, scary story.
Oh.
When Brian got home, the girls told him what was happening, but he thought they were making it up. He was very concerned and thought that it was a really unhealthy part of the grieving process, and maybe he should get the girls into counseling. The tapping continued for several days, but it changed from feeling reassuring to being downright annoying. The tapping would continue all throughout the night, disturbing Jessica and Annie's sleep.
Dad never heard this.
Well, no, because it never happened when he was home.
Oh.
When they would have their dad come in to hear the tapping, it would stop. So he never heard it. Anytime all three of them would leave the house, when they returned, it seemed that things would be like just slightly out of place. Furniture moved around just a little bit. Annie and Jessica were insisting that it was the ghost of their mom who was in the house, but Brian wasn't having it.
Yeah, exactly. If things were moving around,
Yeah,
Right.
well, I don't
and
think
I just buried my wife.
he thought he began to get a little angry with them at the lengths they were going. He thought it was them doing it.
Ah.
In order to convince him that the tapping was real, and it was not healthy.
Right.
They were
Well, you-
playing off of each other.
Also,
and their
imagine
time
what he's
alone.
going through. I mean, his
Yeah.
wife has just passed away, and now his daughters are hearing things. I mean,
This
this guy's
family-
world
She's
is coming
communicating
down.
back. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
family has really gone through it, and unfortunately, they're going to go through much more.
Oh no.
He began to get, like I said, angry at the lengths they were going to convince him, and told them it was not healthy. And on top of it, he felt incredibly guilty that he had to leave them alone so often. He told them that if they didn't stop this whole ghost thing, he was going to make them go to counseling. The girls were in turmoil. They felt like completely alone, and now they're afraid to be in their own home. The knocks had progressed to the point where the girls no longer thought it was their mother, and they were scared to be alone in the house at night.
Oh wow.
They now thought they had invited an evil ghost to come in through the Ouija board, and they had just pretended had just pretended to be their mom at first, but had now progressed to tormenting them and keeping them awake at all hours. The situation took a turn in January of 1987. The girls were home alone and in the living room when they started to hear sounds coming from the basement. They were frustrated at the whole situation and decided to confront the problem. This is how horror stories,
Absolutely.
horror movies
Yeah,
happen.
you don't go in the basement alone.
But together they headed down into the basement. But as soon as they reached the bottom of the steps, the tapping stopped. Frustrated, they turned around to go back up the stairs, and that's when they saw a note written in red on the wall saying, "I'm in your closet. Come and find me."
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
911.
that's like, yeah.
I'm moving
They
house.
did not go to the closet.
Yeah.
They left the home. They ran
Yeah.
out and they ran to a neighbor's home.
Oh, but
and-
can they even tell their dad?
Well,
'Cause,
no,
like-
they did. To their credit, they waited. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
for
but
one
what
thing,
is he going to believe them? Is my thing.
Okay, so here's the thing. They waited till you got home, and they're like, okay, now there's proof, right? There's proof, and of
They
course
just didn't bring it with them.
he's not. Well, he went into the house and he looked at the note was still there.
Oh,
It was
okay.
it was written on the
Stupid
wall,
ghost.
and
Right.
but when faced with what are you going to believe? There's a ghost, or that your daughters have just taken this turn to a
Right.
very unhealthy grieving
Well,
process.
even I mean, you'd even be willing to accept mental illness too.
Yeah, something
you know,
like that. He
schizophrenia
was
or-
so concerned. And so he did. He called counseling. He started them with counseling sessions. He called it the very next day. Several weeks went by with nothing happening, no tapping or anything, but then...
Oh, boy.
One night when Brian was working late in the night and the girls were home alone, they started hearing tapping again. They followed the sounds to Annie's bedroom, where they found another note written on the wall that said, "I'm back. Find me if you can." Again, they ran out of the house to the neighbor's house, waited for their dad to come home, and told him. And again, he is frustrated. He's at his wit's end. And so he told them to stay there at the neighbor's house. He's going to go into the house, search it from top to bottom. Okay.
Uh-oh.
So when he goes to the house and he opens the door, he couldn't believe his eyes. The house had been completely ransacked. Drawers pulled out and emptied, things knocked off shelves, and at this point he knew his girls did not do this.
Right.
Good.
This is when he changed his mind. He was on edge as he started methodically searching the entire rest of the house.
Yeah, well, you're also thinking back to, I mean, if you finally come to terms that this is the evidence that this is not the girls.
Them, yeah.
You're thinking back to all of those other times.
Right.
Like, who is this? You know?
Right.
Yes. So it was, the house was dead silent. There was no tapping, nothing. And he is looking room to room methodically. He went up the stairs to Annie's bedroom. He saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And then as he turned to survey the room, Brian saw a man standing inside Annie's closet.
Oh.
The man was wearing women's clothes that Brian recognized as his wife's clothes, and he was holding a hatchet. A moment passed while the two men just stared at each other, taking in the situation. Then suddenly the guy in the closet rushed past Brian and ran away out into the house. Brian chased after him, but the guy disappeared. Like all of a sudden, like you couldn't find him. He disappeared. And that's when Brian thought, well, maybe, the dude's got an axe. Maybe I shouldn't be chasing him.
Right.
Arson.
That's when
I'd set the house ablaze.
It's over.
Yeah.
Well,
Get out of
that's
that.
not what he
Right.
did. Maybe that's what you would have done. But he went to the neighbor next door where his daughters were, and he called the police. When the police arrived, they looked through the entire house top to bottom, and they couldn't find anyone. And they couldn't figure out where this guy went. Because, he's not going to just run down the street in women's clothes and nobody see him. It is in the middle of the night, but...
Still, you wouldn't run down the middle. That's...
Yeah, you would think somebody would see him, but nobody could tell where this guy went. And they believed the story, but there was really nothing that they could do if they couldn't find anyone. So, Brian couldn't understand how the guy got away, but they decided... Brian, Annie, and Jessica to go stay with family, and the police would then keep an eye on the house. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian felt horrible for not believing Annie and Jessica and for leaving them alone in the house with this lunatic.
Right.
Yeah.
This creepy dude.
The girls felt traumatized from having lived with and communicated with this guy for so long and being convinced it was their mom.
Yeah,
or
you're
a
pen
ghost.
pals
Right.
with the guy for a little while.
Yeah. And he's in your room.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they couldn't stay away forever, though. And so after 2 weeks, they decided to move back home and had planned to get a security system installed, cameras everywhere. But as they were driving up the street back to the house, Brian saw that a window on the second floor of the house was lit up. He knew he had turned off all the lights, and he really didn't think that the police had gone in the house.
Right.
So as he's looking at the window, he all of a sudden sees a guy in a dress walk across the window.
Ugh.
He stopped the car and called police immediately.
Right.
Police surrounded the house, and then they carefully went inside. No one, not Brian or the girls or even police, had entered the house in 2 weeks, but it was apparent that somebody had been inside the house. The furniture had all been knocked over or just turned upside down. And oddly, this is so weird. This is what makes it really creepy to me.
It's not only creepy. It's already creepy.
It's
Yeah.
already creepy, but there were pennies glued to the ceiling all over throughout the house.
You don't decorate your house that way?
Yeah.
Just
Pennies glued to the ceiling. and
who
there
can
was
afford
writing.
nickels or dimes?
Yeah.
I know,
Right.
yeah. And
In
there was
this
writing
economy?
all over the walls in red,
Yeah.
which turned out,
be lipstick.
no, I think it turned out to be ketchup or something. It wasn't blood, but it was red. And
Well, who tasted
and-
that to figure it out? Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they did something to figure out if it was somebody's blood. Anyway, so listen. One observant officer finally found the entrance to a crawl space behind the washer and dryer in the basement. Inside, they found that somebody had tunneled through the insulation through to different rooms of the house and had poked peepholes
Ugh.
in all of the rooms. Police found and apprehended a teenaged boy that would turn out to be Danny LaPlante, a boy Annie had briefly dated in the past.
Oh, creepy dude.
When Annie broke it off with Danny, he had entered their house and started living in the crawl space, spying on the family and listening to their conversations. He lived there for months, all through the loss of Annie and Jessica's mom.
Oh, yeah, super creepy guy.
Danny was arrested and put in a detention center, I guess because of his age.
Not a mental detention center?
Yeah, right.
No. And then later in 1987, when Danny was let out of the detention center, he then broke into someone else's house. Things were very different this time.
Oh, yeah.
LaPlante sexually assaulted and murdered a pregnant mother. And her
pregnant mother?
Yes, and her 2 small children. I think they were aged 7 and 9. He is currently serving multiple life sentences.
Oh, my
As
goodness.
he should.
Wow.
My information came from the Mr. Ballin YouTube series, Terrifying Secrets in the Basement, and Wikipedia.
Oh, wow.
Ugh.
Creepy dude.
Yeah,
Yep.
got the heebie-jeebies. Well, for my last story, let's take a look at something a little less murdery and nasty. I'm going to talk about the viral sensation of 8800 Blue Lick Road. If that's not ringing any bells, this this seemingly innocuous house located in Louisville, Kentucky, became a spectacle after a 3D tour of the home began circulating online in 2020. The home, formerly belonging to Bonaventure Boulevard Church of Christ, had a distinguishably odd layout attributed to the church's continual renovations and additions in order to accommodate its growing demands. The church was later sold and became the warehouse of a fencing operation, where thousands of random items were stored as they were bought and sold by the new owners. They ran an internet,
Yeah, you say
resell.
fencing. I'm thinking like fencing, like pickets and things like that. You're talking about...
when I read it the first time, I'm thinking like the sport.
Sports?
Yeah,
Oh.
the fencing operation.
Now, this is selling products.
Right.
Okay.
Buying and reselling
Whatever.
random items on the
And it's
internet.
funny, you came up with this story, and but I had seen it online,
Right,
Of course,
back when
because one thing, it's from Louisville, and it's interesting. And I think the reason it was a 3D walkthrough was because it was being sold.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the house became intensely cluttered by all of these items. And when the owner had it listed on Redfin, who took the 3D photos, it wasn't long before the strange house made its way onto many forums and threads full of people baffled by its contents, leading to scavenger hunts where people would find an item of note and challenge others to take the 3D tour and try
Isn't
to
that
find
cool? That's cool. And
Yeah.
like in this house or this building, it had a baptismal thing. It had
was a
we'll get
church,
to that.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so the most notorious item
there
was
you go.
the bathtub. I remember when this circulated. I remember when it first came out. And I thought to myself, it's a bathtub. How hard can it be to find? And the challenge just reeked of clickbait. It's just one of those
Yes.
can you find the bathtub? I don't know. It read weird. But I was lured in, and sure enough, the bathtub just doesn't make any sense. It's located up 2 flights of stairs that are on opposite ends of the house. One flight goes up 1 story, and then the second flight goes up to the next story, but they're on opposite ends of the
side.
house. And we're not talking like, regular bedrooms and stuff. I mean, these are alleys at this point of just warehouse items. It's tucked behind these mounds of junk. And finally, I found this bathtub, and it was its own room, entirely walled in with a staircase leading to nowhere on the opposite side.
Oh, there you go.
Right.
Okay, I'll let the cat out of the bag then.
Yeah.
So,
well, growing up in the church, a Church of Christ, coincidentally, I recognized it as a baptistry. And without the backstory, it made no sense whatsoever that a baptistry was just tucked away in the middle of the upper floor of this house with soap bottles and disposable cups lining its sides. I mean, blessings on blessings. If you're bathing in a baptistry, Head and Shoulders, Irish Spring Bar, Anyway, the owner would later be interviewed.
So you're wholly clean?
Yeah, wholly clean. The owner would later be interviewed where he explained that he had added quite a few walls to make the property into more of a house than a church. I assume this baptistry wasn't entirely walled in
Probably
when he
not.
first bought the house, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure it was viewable from the outside somewhere,
well,
like a sanctuary or
and
something.
where it is, it's kind of in the center, and it's not 3 stories because it's Kentucky, so it's very hilly. And I assume the bottom story is
It's
kind of
like a
basement.
walkout basement.
Yeah. But this baptistry is kind of in the center of this top story.
So really the Holy of Holies.
Right. Well, yeah. And, right. I wasn't going to include this, but I mean, it's right past the aisle of softcore pornography collection. Yeah. So, I mean, if I get, anyway.
Oh, God.
So,
And
but
that
it
went downhill quick.
yeah, but I assume, this wall that was up wasn't there and it was visible
Yeah,
to
to
the
those.
lower story of the house where you could view up, anyway.
Somebody
The
being
upper
That's how I
right.
imagined it.
Right. Hence the stairwell to nowhere.
Right. And it's so hard to visualize that, even if, you could see the 3D tour, which you can't now. I'll talk about that in a second. But it's so hard to visualize that because the tour just seems like a labyrinth. It's crazy. Anyway, unfortunately, the listing has been taken down due to someone purchasing the home in March of this year. Congratulations to that lucky fellow. So we were unable to find the 3D tour. It doesn't exist anymore. However, many YouTube videos still exist of popular YouTubers taking the challenge. So you can go watch them and see the house through their eyes.
Yeah, there's like pig trails through all of the
It's
hoarder
wild.
stuff. It's
wild.
crazy.
There are sections of it that are very well
Maintained,
organized
right.
and maintained, but in
And
general
then it gets
it's
worse as you go further and further around.
Well, there's definitely parts of the house that were neglected that you just never saw. Anyway, I got my info from boingboing.net, the right place to get all of your information, inputbag.com, avclub.com, and knowyourmeme.com.
Wow, that was very rigorously researched.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
All right, guys, you know the rules. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post, and put your answer to the Trivia Challenge question in the comments of that post. The first person to do all of that will be the winner and will be mentioned in an upcoming episode of Remnant Stew.
Okay. This facility, located in an extremely remote area of the world, was created in order to preserve non-human life in the event of a cataclysmic event. It was created to preserve non-human life from extinction, let me say that, in the case of a cataclysmic event. What is the name of this place and where is it located?
Wow. Hey, thanks for spending time with us. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Remnant Stew Podcast. You can also send us an email to say hi or suggest a topic for a future episode at staycurious@remnantstew.com. We would love to hear from you.
Remnant Stew is now a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. I want to say thanks to Sam for helping me research, write, and host today's episode.
Yay!
Our audio producer is Philip Sinquefield. Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod with voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks goes out to Steve and Judy Meeker and Harbin Gould.
Before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head over to Apple Music and leave us a review. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, family, and that guy living in your crawl space. Until next time, remember to choose to be kind and
Always stay curious.